Ready.
Welcome to the show, Marike and Clinton. I'm delighted to have you here today with me. And
Thank you, Miriam.
yes, we
Hello,
already
hello.
had a little pre-conversation already on slow productivity, slowing down, and all the questions around that. And I would be actually curious to see how we can pick up this conversation, this thread, to link it to the work we do as facilitators and the work you do as facilitators and trainers. And before we're getting there, I always start with the same question and curiosity. When did you start calling yourself facilitators? And actually, do you?
I do. I was working for quite a long time of my career in politics and doing a whole lot of things, predominantly driven towards winning votes. And realizing at some point that not many people in politics at that stage were focusing on supporting people to be their best selves and focusing on people just surviving a really challenging context. So try to bring more of that, and that kind of organically developed into what I didn't know then was going to be a career in facilitation and people development. And it's interesting because it extended into requests from colleagues like, how do we make the year-end function better? Which made me realize that facilitation is not just training or workshops, but is so much more. It is about gathering and bringing people together well. What about you, Clinton?
Yeah, I think I was facilitating before I knew it. It started, I suppose, at university level. I was the eager beaver, always on, if there was a committee, I was on the committee. And, as you naturally get involved and you think to yourself, oh, wait, this thing could be done a little bit better. Next year, we should do it this way. And then you start getting involved in the organizing and then in the facilitation of something. And fast forward a couple of years after university, a mutual friend of Marike and I actually sent me a job opening at said political party that Marike was also at, and said, I know you're interested in politics. I know you're interested in going into politics. It's not the usual thing that you would be interested in going, working in parliament and media officer and all these things. But here's something that I think is a lot aligned to what you used to do at university. That's leadership development. It's bringing people together. I think you would be interested. And I read the job description. I was like, yeah, I like this. You can get paid to do this. This is amazing. And then I went there, and I suppose the moment where I would say I realized that, facilitation is what I want to do more of and get skilled in was probably a conversation that Marike and I had on a bus in 2017 in January. I was attending a seminar that Marike was facilitating on facilitation and moderation. And it was with a group of people from around the world doing that kind of work in politics. And I was the participant. And we sat on this bus, and I realized, wow, you don't have to be a politician to be in politics. You can do this kind of work and yield, I think, much more immediate results. And I get a kick out of it. I really like it. I feel like I'm contributing to something. Mm-hmm. And then I said to Marike, I think that's what I want to do. I want to learn facilitation a lot more. And her response was, fantastic. Let's put together programs. We're going to do this. And awesome. Yeah, my life has been a roller coaster ever since.
Beautiful. And so what caught my curiosity, listening to both of you, is the connection between politics and facilitation, and namely the sharp contrast between politics, where it's all about having an agenda. It's all about not being neutral, but pushing a certain goal, strong belief forward. And how did you make the shift? What was the maybe new mental model or mindset shift, or just a different attitude to move from pushing an agenda to basically stepping to the back of the room and embracing this facilitator neutrality?
Oh, that's such a great question. It's interesting because I think both pieces of work, both industries, professions are around deeply purpose-driven work in its best form. Politics for me is about a deep belief in a specific value set. And I was lucky enough that I wasn't political at all when I was younger or at university, and kind of fell into working in parliament. And then discovered that there's this set of values around people being themselves, people living the life they truly value, being able to be your best despite the circumstances of your birth, being free. That, for me, in a way, then translated without me knowing into the values I stand for as a facilitator. So it's almost as if there wasn't a kind of a divide that I had to cross, because what I believe to be true politically is also what I believe to be true in facilitation. I can imagine that that might not always be the case, but in my case, I was quite lucky that the pathway felt smooth. It was about creating this environment in which others can thrive and choose for themselves. And my role is about enabling that for other people. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, and it makes sense then, especially now when I understand a big portion of the work you do is in political education as well, and facilitating NGOs or in the political space. So facilitating the healthy debate, the sharing different points of views, maybe even standing in this opposition to find a common truth and a way forward.
I think we realized quite early in our organization's development that not many people are creating this space in which you can slow down and think about what it is you want to achieve without feeling this enormous pressure of winning. I think in a political world, it's a lot more direct. I mean, there's always the incentive of making profit, etc., obviously in a corporate world. But in politics, it's often, if you fail to be elected or if your NGO fails to drive the issues that matter, you won't exist. Your donors won't give you money. Your voters won't stand by you, etc. And so this place of calm in a culture, an organizational culture that often doesn't encourage that, was quite interesting to create for organizations where they're just not used to it. And then you are also facing an external context that's often so challenging. So Clinton and I find ourselves in fascinating places around the world, in Mexico, in Palestine, in Taiwan, in Ukraine, where people are really up against some serious constraints. And you have to find a way to slow down, to pause, to still create a beautiful space of connection, regardless of the fact that you're working in a world that often doesn't encourage that. Yeah. Clinton, I'm not sure whether you want to add to that.
I do. I want to say amen. And for me, I think I was struck by this word you used earlier about neutrality. And then I asked myself, am I really neutral? Because I know as facilitators, you know, we are there, but we're also not there. And I find myself more there than not there. And I suppose it comes from this, because of the space we work in, where there is a belief in a certain set of values, in freedom, in more liberal values, although that has become sort of a swear word in the world, but in the context of expanding individual freedom, I would say. And it means different things in different contexts. As a facilitator working in that politically adjacent or even directly political environment, I want to create the experience of freedom in the gathering. I find it so contradictory that people say, you know, oh, I'm a facilitator for this political party and we're standing for freedom and we're doing all these things in our country. But then the things they do, the gatherings they have, are in themselves not an experience of freedom. And that is such a missed opportunity, because what better way to tell people, to convince people that your way forward is the way you think the world should go, if you can't give them that experience. So for people to walk away from a political gathering or even an NGO, I mean, we don't just do political work, but to walk away from something and it's almost like they have this question, that was different and I'm not sure why, but I really liked that and I felt alive. And it often is to do with freedom. There was agency, individual agency. They, as a person, felt seen, they felt heard, and they felt a deep sense of connection, probably to themselves, but also to the people around them. And that's the kind of world that we want to enable, not just in what we teach, but also how we create the experiences for people.
Thank you. And somehow something that came up for me while listening to you is the connection between the values you stand for. So you mentioned the political values and that they have to translate into the experience you're creating. And I wonder whether what came up for me is that it actually translates to any other values or belief systems that we bring in. And I wonder whether we are actually taking sufficient time as facilitators to really think about what do we stand for? And how does this translate into the experience we're creating for the groups that we gather or that we host?
Yeah. I feel quite privileged reflecting on it now as a conversation, because in a way it's been a signpost or a direction that's been given that I think maybe Clinton and I were not always so conscious of or aware of, that we have this, our origin story is in a way of working where values play a big role, and therefore we've brought it into our facilitation practice very strongly. Certainly if I think about myself as a facilitator now and having a bit more confidence than I had when I was starting off, for me it's the parameters of what I say yes and what I say no to. And I don't know about you, Miriam, but it's taken me a while to get to that place as a facilitator where I can listen to a client in whatever sector they work in, not just politics. And I can say, this is aligned to the type of experience that I want to create for people in a room, or actually I think this is not the best fit for me, because I don't think I will be at my best for the participants in the room, regardless of what I think they need. So they're helpful not just for creating an experience in the room. They're helpful to guide our work. Yeah.
Now, I would be curious. Oh, sorry, Clinton, you look as if you want to add something.
Yeah, I was thinking of one specific value that came up for me that took me a while to name and to, in a way, embrace, and that is joy. Earlier in my, I mean, I like cracking a joke here and there, and Marike can tell you stories of Marike can tell you stories of inappropriate jokes. And I think in the start of my awareness as a facilitator, I toned it down because I thought, I'm not going to be taken seriously. I'm not going to be, I'm undermining my own credibility. So we must, embody this persona in a way. And that just wasn't me. So now, I would say in the beginning years, I sort of pendulum between too much humor and no humor at all. And it's only now when I was able to name that value that is important to me as joy, and being joyful in an appropriate way that creates also a joyful experience for participants. And a part of that for me is humor. And once you know that, then that's freeing in a way, because it also allows you to say, okay, in this context for this work, I'm not feeling joyful. Now, it doesn't mean that you only have lighthearted sessions. Of course, it comes with being able to hold space for a difficult conversation. And certainly in the work and the context we work in, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of trauma. There's a lot of external contexts that really create difficult scenarios for people. And at the same time, there can be an underlying sense of hope and joy that can go with that. And that for me is a sort of a guiding light to know within myself when something is working, when something is not.
Yeah. Thank you. And thank you for making the distinction between joy must not mean light-hearted. And I like the combination of joy and hope. Because especially in difficult conversations or loaded contexts, I think if we connect joy to the hope, it means, okay, there is something on the other hand. We can go through that, but with this, lightness of hope, and hence with joy.
Exactly. It's the I would say the flip side of, or the unintegrated side, or the unhealthy side of joy is to think that it is to make light of something that does not require you to make light of it.
Toxic positivity.
Exactly. And to crack a joke because actually you yourself are uncomfortable with a difficult conversation. And so that has probably taken the longest time for me to develop within myself, that sense of discernment of no, just hold it back. I know you want to say something now, hold it back. It's not appropriate now. And at the same time, or in other times, to use it to your advantage, that allows people to feel at ease, to learn in a joyful environment, because I think that is crucial.
And it's so important to realize, as you said, that why are we making this joke? Is it to release our discomfort? Is it because we cannot sit in the silence? Or is it in service for the group that might need a little bit of a change in dynamics or in speed and pace?
Yeah, exactly.
There's a beautiful there's an awareness in a body of work that Clinton and I work a lot with, the thinking environment. And one of the components is, of course, the component of appreciation. And the neuroscience shows that your brain needs 5 times more appreciation than it needs criticism. And I think when we speak about something like joy, and Miriam, you use the word hope, and I would add to that things like imagination, bringing that into the room, and a sense of progress and optimism, forward momentum. It is about bringing in the things that are going well. And so in the thinking environment, facilitators often say, noticing that which is going well and saying it. And I often feel with groups, it's such a missed opportunity when we don't create space for people to notice and say it. It doesn't always have to come from us as facilitators, but it's like a finely woven fabric of joyfulness, of the beauty that exists between us, of the things that make our relationships, this network, this intricate network, stronger. By not just subtly kind of having it in our awareness that, yes, it's there, I kind of get along with this colleague, but actually thinking intentionally about it and having the space to express it. So before we get to the hard stuff, we would often focus on just doing that in a non-contrived way, because it can also, as we all know, feel a little bit contrived. What do you appreciate about your colleague Miriam? And say it directly to them now. So finding ways to do that with people in a way that feels real, that just feels like a beautiful moment with a friend over a coffee, where you go, wow, I didn't expect that to come out now. And because I've had that, it enables me to have the more difficult conversations that follow.
Thank you for emphasizing this. And I indeed think that it is a missed opportunity, because we're so often under the pressure of tackling the topic while we're there, facing the problem, the challenge, confronting the conflict. And I think, as you say, when we emphasize the appreciation, it's as if we are lighting the end of the tunnel. That's why we're here. This is what's worth fighting or conflicting for. That's the growth journey about, because if there's nothing that's going well that we aspire, that we're grateful for, why bother at all? So I think it's also a way to actually create motivation and hope in the session.
Can I share a story of what happened just last week?
Please.
I was facilitating a 2-week seminar on strengthening NGOs, and so thinking very deeply about strategy and purpose and organizational culture and so on. So there's a very content-heavy focus. And the way that my co-facilitator for that program, who was not Marike, unfortunately, we designed it in such a way that, it ends with this appreciation note. We often, for longer programs where there's the relationship structure to hold something like appreciation with authenticity. At the end of this program, we did a round of, what is one quality you appreciate in yourself, and then what is one quality that you appreciate in the person to your right. And that would be the last thing that we do at the end of this program. And it often goes very emotional, because people actually appreciate genuine qualities, and then they're doused in, those good hormones and the joy and the appreciation that the thinking environment calls for. And as we were sitting and going around this circle, I noticed that 2 participants in the room were sitting next to each other, they have a geopolitical complex situation. The one participant is from Ukraine, and the other participant is a Russian in exile. And for the 2 weeks, they were not unfriendly to each other, but they sort of just, I would say strategically avoided each other, perhaps. That was my reading, at least, of the situation. And as the room went around, I noticed that the 2 of them were sitting next to each other. So now that one would have to appreciate the other. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, Clinton, why? Why did you do this? Why didn't you do some strategic, let's go sit in another place, moment? And anyway, I just noticed it and I thought, okay, that's fine. Let's just see what happens. And I really hope it went well. And then it came around, and the Ukrainian participant then had to appreciate the Russian, of all things. And this moment, I could almost feel the tension build in the room to this moment. And the participant turned to the Russian and then said something like, oh, wow, I'm only noticing your beautiful eyes for the first time now. That was not the appreciation. And then, they went ahead and then said, I thank you, or I appreciate you for your sense of purpose. You work with a clear purpose and your ability to connect with others. And then there was this kind of pregnant pause where everyone was like, okay, and now, and of course, then you say thank you, but it felt like it needed more. And then sort of with body language, the 2 of them said, shall we hug? Is this calls for a hug? And they stood up, and just before they hugged, the Ukrainian participant said to the rest of the room, first time in history, and then the two of them hugged. And the whole group just started erupting in applause because we didn't know what else to do. We were applauding and crying, and that for me is like the essence of how something small like that can ignite hope in all of us, because then we thought, okay, if we can do it here, if we can get it right here, when two people can find each other, despite the context that stands in the way, with reason, then perhaps it is possible to do something different.
Thank you. What a beautiful story. And I think I loved how you introduced it, that you had this moment of overthinking. Did I make the right call? Can I do that? And what I find so powerful in that is the trust in the group. That we cannot control it. It's out of our hands. And sometimes this heap of trust that they can handle it. And maybe if it would have just ended with, I appreciate your beautiful eyes, it would have already been good enough. But I think it's something that many of us, fight with, overthinking that we have to protect the group, protect the participants. Although I think once we trust them and step back and maybe take the risk, then these things, as you just described, then they can happen, not when we protect them.
Yeah, and I think, sorry, Marike, I think it also is because in our approach to facilitation, we put relationships first. We always, kind of carry in the back of us, connection before content. And it is the connection that you feel with others in the room that allows the content to land in a particular way. In a way, this ties to psychological safety. If we feel like we're in a safe space where people have, where there is trust and there is psychological safety, then I'm okay to make mistakes. I'm okay to learn. It's okay to do that. So I think it is the result of putting a lot of attention and care and thoughtfulness to create the space where those relationships can take off. And I find perhaps in the first or in the earlier years of my facilitation journey, I focused a lot on content, and you think like, oh, it's the content that makes, that's the purpose of why we're gathering. And now I'm going to share my 20 slides with you. But actually, it's when you create that deeper experience where people can build that relationship, that's the thing they remember. And then they also remember your content.
And the price of those relationships, the benefit is these moments that surprise you, where you felt perhaps the risk averse or the scared part of you felt like, oh my goodness, can they handle it? What is going to come now? And then sometimes, as you say, Miriam, it just works and there's enough to hold it. The price of being in relationship, I think, is also sometimes discomfort. I think when there is, we spoke about toxic positivity earlier, when it's just this kind of on the surface contribution by participants, it feels safe, but it's actually us just kind of swimming in the shallow water when we all know how to swim in the deep water. That is not being in relationship with each other. So in a way, if you dedicate your facilitation practice to cultivating an environment where people really are in relationship, you have to take it with both things. That sometimes it leads to these incredible moments that are enriching and joyful and hopeful. And sometimes it leads to a little bit of discomfort that perhaps in the moment is difficult, but that ultimately, I would say, most of the times also serve the group in some way or another. Just needs a bit more work.
Yeah. And I would even push this further. I think without the discomfort, there is no learning, there is no deepening.
Absolutely.
And without the deep waters, they wouldn't need us. Groups can be shallow together without a facilitator.
Yeah.
Exactly. No, we're designed for the deep waters. Yeah, and then you know, if you're constantly in scenarios where you're swimming in the deep water, my brain goes, okay, so how are you taking care of yourself so that you're not paddling insanely to create this environment, hold these conversations, but that you really have the space, the ease, the pause, the moments between things to step out of the deep water and rest.
How do you do that?
Oh, it's a lifelong endeavor, I will say.
I thought you had the magic pill.
It is I think slowing down, we were speaking about it before this conversation, is such a hard thing to do. And when you've got your heart in your work and you're invested in creating the best possible experience for your clients, then it's even harder. A word that Clinton and I think a lot about these days is this word of thoughtfulness and what it means to be a thoughtful leader. And the only thing that I can say is that I think it is impossible to be thoughtful if you're going at 150% or way over the speed limit of your life. That you can only be thoughtful about your needs, the participants' needs, if you slow it down, if you alter pace. And that doesn't mean that you need to have a 10-day holiday, but it might mean that you need a slower hour to zoom in or to zoom out, depending on what your needs are. Yeah, Clinton, what do you think?
Yeah, it's I think people often think that the slowing down, you know, I can slow down when it's holiday. I think the real challenge is to find a pace for yourself as a facilitator, but I suppose also in, you know, as a leader, this idea of slowing down, but also thoughtful pauses is so alive for us at the moment in what we see is needed in the world. And I think the real challenge there is to weave that throughout your way of working throughout the year. This book that I'm currently reading by Cal Newport called Slow Productivity is, I think, what not only sparked it, but also just I suppose gave me confidence and be like, oh yes, there's someone else that also feels this. And he wrote the whole book about it, and he captures it so eloquently. I mean, the tagline of the book is do fewer things, work at a natural pace, and obsess over quality. And that is so alive for us, not only in the way we approach facilitation. I want to say try to approach facilitation, because we are not without our own learnings in this area, but also in what we think is required or is needed, is wanted by leaders at the moment, is to do fewer things. So focus on the things that really move the needle. What is core to your purpose? What is core to what you're trying to achieve in the world? Do that. Do it well. Do less things around it. Focus on the essence. Do it well. And then this idea of working at a natural pace is such a simple and counterintuitive idea, because everything around us tells us, no, more. Get more done, you know, drink a Red Bull and then go faster so you can do more. But what is at the heart of that urgency, that almost like endless chase that we're on? Yeah, so that's what I'm thinking about it. And I also don't have the answers, but At least we have the question.
Which is usually, especially for facilitators, we know that it's all about the question, right? If we pick the right
Indeed.
question, then the answers will follow. But we
Yeah.
often ask the wrong questions. And you recommended the book Slow Productivity when we spoke before my holidays, and I think I finished it in 3 or 4 days, and then we're like, oh no, what am I doing? How can I read Slow Productivity at such a high pace? And still, I think, and I have not thought about the connection between these 3 principles of do less at a slower or natural pace, at a higher quality, how much they would translate actually to the work of facilitation and to the group work that we're doing. Because I think very often we try to squeeze more content, more activities, more things into our sessions, and then it's not the natural pace. We don't allow time to digest ideas, to really connect with the content and with each other. And hence, at the end, what's missing is actually the higher quality.
Mm.
And at
Absolutely.
what price?
Yeah. And then you find yourself kind of going from, let's have 5 minutes for this activity, and now let's report back in 2 more minutes. And then please turn to your partner and have another 2-minute conversation. And you end up having a 90-minute session with a group that feels a bit like a Olympic level activity of pace. And I think it keeps you on the surface. But the interesting thing, Miriam, I think also is that groups and participants sometimes expect that pace from facilitators because it mirrors what they experience in their organizational life. So it's a bit of a paradox that we think a lot about, is how do you create a dense, rich, beautifully designed experience that feels as if there is thought has been given to it. Maybe there is a lot going on, but there is also ease and depth and a natural pace.
Yeah. I 2 things come up for me. One is, I think there's, especially in the corporate world, well, and I think also in politics, actually, in the world,
Yeah, there we go.
there's an inherent anxiety attached to slowing down and suddenly sitting with ourselves and with silence and thoughts and questions, especially when we take more time for questions without immediately going into the answering space. And on the other hand, I think there's, and I'm thinking of the distinction of time, what is it? I have to get it right now. The kairos versus the chronos, where the chronos time is actually the time elapsed as we can count it, and kairos is more the perceived time. And I have the impression that as soon as we slow down just the way we talk and the pause, even if it's high paced, we bring a certain ease and calm into the session. But then this really depends on ourselves, and are we calm and not stressed about, okay, do we have enough time? We need to go to the next activity.
Yeah, lunch is in 20 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it's really about one of your biggest priorities just being on your own being.
Yes.
I have a colleague who always reminds me, Marike, you're not a human doing, you're a human being.
Love that.
And I hear her at the back of my mind when I go into doing mode, and I have an attachment to, are my slides beautiful enough? Is this worksheet, are the questions profound enough to provoke these conversations that I know this group should be having? Can you hear that language? Versus just taking care of how I want to be for people so that they can access a different being for themselves, and trusting that it's maybe not the only thing I'll do, but it is probably enough if it just has to stand on its own.
What comes to my mind now is the notion of care and details. And we spoke about the care for details in our previous conversation to prepare this. That only by slowing down, we can actually be intentional about the details that we want to add.
Mm.
We have a beautiful phrase that we use a lot called delighting in the details. If I think about the most moving, transformative workshops or gatherings that I've been at, I would equate them to a beautiful dinner party with a friend who knew that this is my favorite glass of wine, or this is my dietary preferences, or this is probably where I'll enjoy having the meal. And it's a bit paradoxical because on the one hand, you could say, you know, if you're thinking about all these details, are you sufficiently holding space for the being and the kind of just creating an overall environment? But for us, they go hand in hand. If you can be a certain thing, if you can be attentive, you can be appreciation, you can be ease, you can be freedom for your participants, then it's almost as if you're creating the space for them and for yourself also to notice what is it that then will delight. What is it that would matter most to Clinton? What would matter to Miriam? And how does Miriam take her coffee? What music does Clinton enjoy listening to? What are these things that we could bring into the experience that makes people feel seen in such a subtle way that you almost don't know that it's happened. And so we think a lot about it. We spend a lot of time, and I'm really keen for Clinton to add to this, especially before things happen, trying to get the detail of what might shift the needle for people when they are together.
Yeah, I think my worst nightmare is going into a session blind when I don't know anything about participants, their context, what is challenging for them, what do they hope to get from this. So a standard practice for us is sending out a pre-workshop, pre-session survey where we often ask open-ended questions to people. So, you know, what is going on for you at the moment? What do you most hope to get? What is challenging in your life? What is challenging in your organization? And we would use that data so that we can design something that meets participants where they are emotionally, but also in terms of their expectations and their needs. But it's more than just, you know, meeting expectations, because that almost again serves you so that you know, oh, I've done a good job. But it's going beyond that and going, how can I create a really thoughtful experience for this person? And you can't do that if you don't know what's going on for them. That is empathy. Empathy is having the data so that you know what's going on for someone, so that you can design for their context. And so that is a standard practice for us, gathering that information. And I think in the context also then of, you know, how do we create this moment of slowing down? How do we invite people to, from the get-go, embody a different way of being in themselves when they show up? Is we pay careful attention to even the words we use in the invitations we send out in our communication, that it in itself signals to people, this is going to be different. This is, you know, there's something different here that tells me, okay, these people are thinking about this, they've thought about this. And actually in one of our programs, the School of Facilitation, we were once grappling with this question: how do we get people to arrive, people who don't know each other necessarily, how do we get them to arrive? We only have 4 days together, and immediately step into a different way of being. And, you know, the standard practice of a facilitator is, okay, arrive, we're going to introduce, maybe we talk a little bit about the why of the program, then we're going to allow everyone to introduce themselves, maybe we play some, do an activity. And we just said, no, let's take a risk. Let's do something completely different. Let's not welcome everyone in the traditional way. We created what we call an arrival experience, which is essentially a set of questions with a short welcome note from us about what it means to arrive for yourself. And so these would be questions like, how are you feeling right now in your body? What do you notice about your breathing? How has the last week been for you? How do you want to be in the time that we have together? Is there something you can take care of right now that would allow you to be more present, that would allow you to be more easeful? Can you send a message to someone to take care of something for yourself? And the magic of this, the detail that comes into this, is we would often pair it with a playlist that we've put together, and we ask them to bring headphones with them, so that the first thing they get from us is, okay, hello everybody, here's the questions. You're now going to have 20 minutes to check in with yourself. Here are the questions. Here is the playlist. Go sit anywhere in the garden, anywhere you want, grab a cup of coffee and just journal for yourself about this. You're not going to report back on the questions. It's for yourself to arrive. And then when they come back, the energy is completely different. People are at ease. They have arrived. And so we've created that space together, and then we can do the formalities. Okay, let's introduce ourselves, talk about the why. But it completely changes the tone and the pace of the program.
What I love about that is that to share an experience, you don't have to share it in communication or even. So everyone was individually in their own experience, but they all did the same thing. And hence they did experience the same structure without connecting to each other. But then I think this apparently is incredibly bonding.
It was a huge risk for us. We were perplexed about it for Clinton, I think, weeks. We thought, can you do this? Can you start a 4-day program individually and not as a group, but give them all the same experience and kind of, won't they think it's weird? Won't they think it's a bit disjuncted? And it's interesting because it really, I think it cracks people open in a good way. So what we noticed was that it doesn't only allow them to arrive and to really reflect about themselves and to have, and it's so shocking to say it, 20 minutes for themselves. Because people just don't seem to have 20 minutes for themselves in the world that we find ourselves in. What it also enabled was depth in that opening round. So suddenly people, as you've said, they've had these individual experiences together. Suddenly they were able to access a lot more safety and vulnerability towards one another, without having had that. So it's remarkable, and it's now almost become a little bit of a, I'm hesitant to use the word tradition, practice, ritual for us in our programs that we try to build in. Sometimes I have to admit, without the permission of our clients. This is a bit of the Clinton and Marike flavor that we try to bring in, even if it's just 10 minutes. It makes a huge difference.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I feel so inspired, and I can see all the reasons why this is working and why we need more of that. Also to escape the pressure of performance, I mean, the data shows that there are much more individuals that are in the neurodiversity spectrum who are not up for the spontaneous, immediate connection and speed and noise. And I think to cater for that, and as you said, everyone is so busy constantly that we do not take 20 minutes for ourselves. And I realize, even myself, when I take 20 minutes, I meditate or I journal. So it's always the doing, following a recipe. And then suddenly to have this spaciousness to really connect, why am I actually here? Why did I actually sign up for this program? That we wish participants would do before they arrive to 4 days training. But as a matter of fact, usually they don't. And I also find it funny and great and courageous that you do create this spacious moments without necessarily agreeing with your clients. And I have the impression that what many actually need, but rarely voice or even are aware of, is exactly the time to slow down. And that a facilitated session gathering is actually the opportunity for teams and organizations to just slow down and have time to reflect and to think, and not always be in this collaborative pressure.
It's about creating an environment in which we can pay attention to one another, isn't it? And I think we can only pay attention if our minds are at ease, and we're physically, biologically not at ease when we're under stress and anxiety. I mean, we've all sat in interviews where people say things like, oh, I perform so well under pressure, I love a deadline. You know, that's the type of environment that I thrive in. And I always think to myself, yeah, sure, no, you might get things done, but you certainly cannot do quality thinking over time if you're constantly in that type of environment. And so I think it is this, in addition to whatever topic or theme the workshop has, it's a invisible gift that we're giving participants when we give them this environment in which they can just think for themselves and pay attention and give that rare, precious thing that's limited to each other. And then I think they start noticing things about themselves, about work, about the team that they were unable to see before. And that comes as a complete kind of add-on advantage of the workshop that was actually about, how do I speak confidently in public?
Breathe. I know what you're saying. Yeah.
I think what I find most challenging about that is creating the ease within myself first, and knowing what I need to do and put in place beforehand so that I can let things go. Because if you focus so much on delighting in the detail and creating this thoughtful experience, there's a lot of thought that goes into that, and a lot of planning and things that you would like to have be taken care of. So, you know, when we're done here, lunch is already ready and it's beautiful, it's in the garden, and I know that the kitchen has taken care of that. But if I didn't actually arrange this ahead of time or made arrangements for someone to take care of it and to trust that it has been taken care of, it's going to be in the back of my mind. And because that's the unhealthy side of then, you know, obsessing over the details, where it then impedes on your ability to create the easeful experience, firstly for yourself, so that participants can also take their cue from you. And there certainly have been many times where I have not taken care of the details, where I have not put in place the things that I wanted to before a session so that I can be at ease. And I notice it then within myself. And then you try to fake ease. And that's I think sometimes you can get away with it, but probably not. It's also not the way I want to work. So I want to have a genuinely easeful way of being. I think from that also comes this ability to then to have joy in the moment, if you can actually let the details go and know that it has been taken care of.
It's interesting, Clinton, that you're saying this, because I suspect some facilitators might listen to this and go, well, lunch isn't really my responsibility. I come in and I do the session and then the participants go for lunch. Or I wonder, it's a fascinating thing that we think about that, because I think for us, everything that happens when the group is gathering is an experience or an opportunity for connection, or something that breaks down the connection. And very often what happens, I think, is that there's this beautifully facilitated, held process that happens in the room, whatever the room is. And then people go out for lunch and it's late, or it takes a long time, or dietary needs are not catered for, or people sit in their cliques, or if you've just taught them to please not interrupt each other, suddenly they start interrupting each other again. Or somebody goes to a colleague and says, oh, what I wanted to say to you about this topic that the colleague raised 10 minutes ago. And so the container is held or broken down in the informal spaces where the details matter, that often fall outside of the realm of the strict contracting of the facilitator. When you are responsible for your own programs, like we sometimes are, then we are lucky enough to have power over those details. But it becomes super hard when we don't. And then you have to think about, okay, so how do I ask? What conversations can I have? What participants can I enroll, and how, so that we can maintain the container beyond just the room, the formal room, so that the learning extends in all the parts of the workshop, of the group being together and beyond. And I think it's when there's a sense of self-regulation by the group, I'm not sure whether this is the most helpful language to use, but when they can practice to have a meal together in a new way, then suddenly what we've spoken about in the workshop becomes something that can be taken into the workplace. It doesn't just stop in conference room A. Does that make sense? Because I've just said it like that for the first time, so I just want to check.
No, it does. Absolutely. And I think you've highlighted, an assumption actually that I've expressed, that I think is an assumption in the way that we work, is that we do see everything that we do as a choice. It's not just what happens, in the session, but it is everything. Methodology, Marike and I often say that method is in everything you do. Method is not just, oh, now we're having a fishbowl, now we're doing this, now we're doing a round. Method is just the way you do something, and how people arrive from the airport to your venue, how they interact with each other before the start. Your session has already started, and that is a choice that you make. So either you leave it up to someone else to make that choice, and then that will have an impact on your program. Yeah. But that is where I think we find a lot of joy in that detail. That's the detail in which we delight, where we go, oh my goodness, yes. Then people arrive and immediately they feel this whole thing is contained, that it's a consistent experience from when they first heard from us to even after they've left, and we have followed up with them and we keep in touch, and there's a consistent experience. It doesn't feel like, oh, I was invited to this hotel and then within the room someone spoke and had a great time, but the rest was not so great. It feels like, wow, they've really taken care of everything.
Yes, hell yes. I think it's so important. And I was just reflecting on the fact that we're dealing with group dynamics, with human dynamics that are always a function of our emotions. And if something breaks before they arrive, if they're at the airport and don't know where to go and there's no phone number to call and their credit card doesn't work and they sit there and they're frustrated. This is the energy that they will bring into the space.
Exactly.
And then you can either take care that this doesn't, or reduce the probability that it happens before, or you have to be even more careful in the landing so that you can clean up all the energies. This sounds so woo-woo.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah, to help everyone arrive and get rid of the frustrations. Yeah, the details and the informal spaces where things happen. From your point of view, what makes a workshop fail?
Stepping out of relationship in every way. Participants towards each other, you towards a co-facilitator, you towards a client, you towards yourself. Yeah. That a disconnect from really being in the deep water.
Love that.
Mine now sounds so unprofound. I was going to say just not having the data, not knowing what's going on for your participants. But now that I heard Marike's answer, I want to echo that, because I think that goes before the the doing, the gathering the data, the designing. If you are even out of relationship with your client before the session starts, I think that can lead to the breakdowns. The sessions that have failed for me in the past has been sessions where I made a lot of assumptions about what was going on for people, and then I walked into a session and was quickly disabused of my assumptions. And then, when you realize, oh, this is really going on. Oh, wow, there's really a power struggle. Oh, here's the hierarchy of the organization playing out right in front of me. And here's someone with that point they actually want to make at the board meeting, but now they're going to make it here in your room. It's completely unrelated to what's going on. But yeah, those things do play out in your sessions. And if you are unaware of what is really going on below the surface for people, but also in an organization, I think you increase the probability of the workshop failing.
If you're not present enough and willing to actually adjust too. And then again, we're at the pace, right? So if we are too fast in just following through with our agenda, then we miss the signs and the opportunity to pause and say, okay, let's double click on what's happening here to recreate this relationship.
Yeah. Oh, the amount of agendas I've had to say goodbye to, beautifully thought through, and then something happens in the room, and then I look at my own agenda, my paper that I have, then I'm like, okay, bye, beautiful agenda. Maybe next time I'll use you.
If you have a metal bin in your hotel room, you can almost set it alight in a ceremonial burning of the agenda.
Exactly.
We're being lighthearted, but it is, changing course. Trusting yourself to be able to do that. And trusting that you have the relationship with your client, I think, to be able to do that. And sometimes you have that very directly, which is wonderful. And other times you have to dig deep to create it in that moment.
What remains your facilitation challenge?
Knowing when to say no to work. Yeah, I think sometimes you have conversations with potential clients that are exciting, but for a whole number of reasons, somewhere deep in you, you know that it's just not the right fit. And just trusting that, knowing no is better than yes, and then begrudgingly being in the room out of relationship when you knew actually from the start that maybe this is just not for me.
I think for me the biggest challenge remains, when you need to have a difficult conversation with a participant. Maybe it's something they're doing, maybe it's something that is affecting the group or affecting you, and a conversation is needed. Also, I think because if you're not in conversation, then you are stepping out of relationship. And I'm a serial conflict avoider. So it's those moments where I often sit there and I go, oh, I know I need to go have a chat with this person right now, but I feel like I don't want to, A, and B, if I do it, I need to do it from a real sense of curiosity and really trying to figure out, okay, maybe there is something going on for them that is that is causing them to act in this way. So can I approach it with curiosity instead of judgment? And I really struggle with that, because when I'm in the moment affected by what they're doing, I find it so difficult to step out of my own response mode and my own anger and sort of frustration is perhaps a better word, and to really go to them with a clean slate of curiosity when actually all I want to say is, can you please get off your phone? Because because you're disturbing the mood that we're creating here.
Yeah. Thank you for that honesty, and I can totally relate to that. And the struggle to distinguish what is mine and what is theirs. So am I frustrated because they are not respecting my agenda and all the care that I
exactly
into this?
Did they not see the beautiful program journey in the front of the room?
Exactly. And then, to put all of our own ego and all of that to the side? Or is it really, air quotes, appropriate frustration because it is harming the group?
Yeah.
And not just our egos. So I can definitely relate to this frustration. And then I think it's also something that we can train, right? The awareness, okay, how quick are we in actually connecting to our body sensations that tell us, oh, frustration is coming.
Yeah, exactly. And to ask sorry, Marike, you wanted to say?
No, just who do we have in the room to check that with? To check that with, I think sometimes also we hold ourselves to impossible standards as facilitators. We think, we're not allowed to express, oh, I'm so annoyed right now. When I think it is completely healthy to have a space in where you can express that. And so who is that colleague for you or that friend to whom you can say, there was this person in the room today, I didn't let it show, but it really affected me. It doesn't always have to be self-awareness city for facilitators. I think we can also let our hair down every now and again, but the place to let your hair down is not in front of the group. And if you're always filtering, the risk is that I think at some point it is going to be hard to control, that impossible level of controlledness that we aspire to. So to have the space where we can let our hair down a bit.
And
Clinton,
also to take it with a grain of humor. Because yes, participants trigger us because we're human. And because we have all these moments and we project on them, yes, this happens. And And then, yeah, what to do with this energy, frustration, or where can we vent? And I think that's then the benefit of having a colleague, a co-facilitator, like the two of you working so closely together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Often when Marike and I are, when we're not facilitating together, when we're doing projects separately, you know, during the tea breaks, that's when the voice notes would come. And then it'll often be just a little voice that says, this is not urgent, but I just need to say this to someone. Can you believe? Blah, 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 blah. And then you like rant for 2 minutes and I say, okay, rant over. Thank you very much. Let's talk about other stuff, you know, but you just sometimes, you have to get it out and then find the place to do that with someone who understands it. Yeah. And it's a fortunate thing when you have that relationship in your life where you have that person where you can vent and get it out.
Without being judged of being human.
Yeah.
For being human.
Yeah, exactly. I think being human is not just about journaling and mindfulness practices. And I want to, or going on retreats where you sit quietly and connect with yourself. I really want to normalize the normal ways in which human beings process emotions, in which we connect and engage. And it's so important. We've spoken about the distinction of knowing what is important and appropriate when, but still having these spaces, especially facilitators, where we are so prone to facilitate every space of our life. That is not facilitated is crucial, crucially important.
And to practice that. I think it's not a healthy habit, because there is the urge to control that is related to that. It's suddenly work creeping in all our aspects of our lives. If we bring facilitation wherever we go, always in our little shopping bag.
Yeah. When I go to my family, I mean, this is probably the greatest facilitation challenge for everyone, is put them in their family environment and see what they are. And then the real you comes out, you know.
Yes.
And I have yet to just, I don't know, I think my family would probably be surprised when they see me facilitate. Be like, who is this person? That's often the place where I go in and then I'm like, oh, now I'm going to facilitate connection in our family. And we're going to talk about the things that we're not talking about. And no, it's not going to happen.
That's a different support group.
Exactly.
Yes. The moments my mom would say, stop facilitating me, I'm not your client.
Exactly.
Yes.
Oh, we've all heard it.
But well, we're coming from a good place.
Absolutely. And at least we have some processes to offer.
Yes.
Yeah, shall we do a quick thinking pair around the dinner table?
Yes. 2 minutes, here's the timer. I brought some sticky notes. What is the thing that you would have wished someone had told you when you started your facilitation journey?
Oh, Clinton, go first.
Oh, nice deflection there. I was going to say that first. I think if I knew how much of yourself is part of who you are as a facilitator, I probably would have made peace a lot earlier with my own style and preference of facilitator. We spoke about joy and humor earlier. I think if I knew that, you know, so much of how you prefer to facilitate comes from who you are as a person, I probably would have done a few things differently. I would have embraced it earlier. Of course, that's not a license to, you know, be who you are unapologetically in the way that it, you know, it gives you a blank check to just behave the way you want to. But yeah, if I knew that, I wish someone had said that to me. Maybe I would have made a different career choice. No, I think I would have just done things differently in the past. But I think that awareness is more alive in me now than not.
I think I wish somebody had said to have less of an attachment to methodology as a crutch. That you have to be an expert in a specific process or method in order to be a good facilitator. And of course, if you are, that's incredible. But it's so much more. It's cultivating a being for a room. And I wish I had more of my eye on that at the start of my career, and less of I would reach out to people and say, but can you give me a tip on how to do this? Or what method should I use here? And then be surprised if the workshop does not go as well, even though I had the perfect method that I had sourced from 4 very experienced other facilitators. Method is everything, and you are. You are your, I don't want to say you are your biggest method. You are the thing that transforms the room.
Catalyst.
Mm.
Thank you.
Thank you, Miriam.
Beautiful conversation.
Thanks.
I really enjoyed that.
And I will put in the show notes all the links on how to connect to you to find out more about the facilitation school and the programs you host in South Africa and online.
I'm happy to also share that that playlist that we used for people to arrive. If people want to use that, it's on Spotify. It's open for anyone to use.
Wonderful. We'll put that in the show notes as well. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
for
you,
having
Miriam.
us.
Dum, dum, dum.